Thank you, everyone. Calling this work session to order. We have one item today, and that is equitable transit-oriented development. We have Bynum, who is going to lead us off.
Good
Thank you.
afternoon, Madam Mayor. Bynum Walter, Planning and Development. My remarks this afternoon are a review of planning work that has played out over the past 5 years, maybe more. Lots of Raleigh staff have contributed to this, touches probably every department. And we have folks here from a number of departments today to help answer questions after my remarks. My goal today is to provide a summary of our recent work and how it fits into our community's plan for how we will grow. So we're going to talk about some context for our land use planning and our transit corridors. I'm going to share a brief update about the New Bern Station Area Plan and the Transit Overlay District rezoning that goes with that. We'll also talk about implementation of our Equitable Transit-Oriented Development Guidebook, and that includes a number of strategies to assist existing community, not just in the New Bern corridor, but all the BRT corridors. So just how are we going to do that? I'm going to share some background with you, talk a little bit about development in the New Bern Avenue corridor, talk some about that guidebook and how we've been implementing it, and then we'll just touch on very lightly on some next steps. So what's been happening? So much. Just a reminder, this is a long process that's been playing out over a long time. I got to say, last week's groundbreaking was a really exciting milestone for BRT in Raleigh. Love that. We've been planning for BRT for so long because we have been growing for so long. So we need BRT to support the growth that's already happened and that's anticipated to continue. Over time, our population has increased exponentially. Our land area has increased at an even greater exponent, right? Like how much room we take up just keeps getting bigger and bigger in relationship to the number of people that are here. And what does that look like? So here's 1990, 2000. You can see not just Raleigh, but Cary, Garner, Apex, Morrisville. Everybody's squishing out, taking up more and more room over time here, right? We just keep growing. So since 2009, we've had a plan for how to accommodate existing residents and new people too. The growth framework in our comprehensive plan illustrates a vision that directs 60% of future growth into downtown, city growth centers, bus rapid transit corridors, mixed-use community centers, and all of those are connected via a network of parkways, frequent bus service routes, and urban streets. More recently, we've modified that growth vision to say that half of that 60% should be accommodated within the 4 BRT corridors. And that vision really requires BRT to be successful. It directs growth to places where in Raleigh where we already have well-established infrastructure and services, places where existing infrastructure can be most effectively enhanced to support more people, and places where we can most effectively add services. These are the places that already have the density to support transit and where we can build on existing utility, public safety, and fire services, as well as transportation. And growth over the past, since 2018, has very largely been following that. So this is a map of permits and where they have been pulled across the city. You can see patterns are generally following the plan as shown through this geographic distribution. The plan is working to guide additional development as it's happened. So that's a little bit of citywide context. I want to turn and look at New Bern. First, let's talk about people, because people is really what makes Raleigh great, right? This area has a higher percentage of Black residents than the city average, and it has a high percentage of working adults. And while the percentage of Black residents in this area is higher than the citywide average, it's not as high as it was in 2000. Demographics have changed. Similarly, household income has changed. It's increased during the same period. Property values, and that means housing costs, have also increased. You want to think about this as we look at a couple of examples of development that have been happening in recent years. They also show why action is necessary. If we just leave things to the existing market and zoning, the result is just going to be more of the same. So this first example I want to look at with you is Battery Heights. So on the map, you can see outlined in yellow teardowns that have been existing houses that were torn down and replaced since 2013, and those white lots outlined were vacant lots that were there was new construction there in the last 10 years. So there's 37 lots that have seen new construction. Of those, 19 were vacant in 2013. And then I want to call out 2 lots on Martin Street in the 1200 block. These are, there are 2 houses here in 2016. They're both sold around the same time. And then today, one of the houses has been torn down and replaced with a new house, more than twice the size of the original. The 1930s built house sold for double the 2013 price in 2021, and the new house sold for 4 times the 2015 price in 2020. Houses are getting bigger and more expensive. Then in Pender Hill, here's another example. There's 70 lots here that have seen new construction in the last 10 years. Of those, 44 were vacant in 2013. There have been a number of new houses built in this area outlined in pink here that are city development. And then the project in Pender Hill that I want to, or the development I want to highlight here, is a couple of lots on Boyer and Pettigrew Street. In 2007, there are 3 houses here. All 3 are destroyed by the tornado in 2011. Remember that in April of 2011. And now what's there, new houses built between 2015 and 2017, all are significantly larger than the originals. Again, houses are getting bigger and more expensive. Supply is increasing, but only incrementally. And then the last example I want to show is in Idlewild. This is just southeast of Oakwood. You can see the Oakwood Historic District hatched in the upper left here. Again, 48 lots with new construction since 2013. 38 were vacant, and then there were 4 houses built by the city. Again, significant change in the area. I want to highlight some lots here on New Bern at Sewell Avenue. So in 2018, there's a 1980s office building and these 2 single-family houses, right? Today, there are 38 townhouses that were built between 2021 and 22. This development is compliant with the NCOD, and because of the OX base district here, there's an opportunity that they've been able to provide an alternate to that single-family pattern that we've seen in some of these other examples. There's no COs on the eastern units yet, so we don't have sale prices yet. But what's this showing us is that there's demand for alternatives to single family, and the market's doing that when it can. Part of what these examples illustrate is that zoning doesn't determine whether or not something redevelops. Redevelopment is happening because the market is pushing it, right? But it does shape what that redevelopment can look like. So thinking back on this, what we're seeing is single-family residential is mostly being replaced by new, larger, more expensive single-family houses. Prices are increasing exponentially. Supply is increasing incrementally. And that's just putting a lot of pressure on everybody who already lives here and everybody who wants to live here. And then other types of housing are already allowed in some places, and those are in demand. If we don't do anything, we're going to keep getting more of this, right? We can expect to see these same patterns of an increasingly white population with higher household incomes and increasing housing prices. Doing nothing is probably the least equitable choice that we have. So I want to shift and talk a little bit about the Equitable Transit-Oriented Development Guidebook. This is work that we set out intentionally to do to shape what happens around our BRT corridors, to shape and change the pattern that we have been seeing for the past 10 years. Again, this directs a high percentage of growth into our BRT corridors, and it came from this planning process that we did to develop the guidebook. So a reminder of what is transit-oriented development. It's pedestrian-oriented, it's compact, it's mixed use, and it's centered on quality public transit. It typically includes a mix of housing, office retail, neighborhood amenities, and other uses within walking distance of a transit station. It reduces the need for driving by creating walkable neighborhoods with easy access to activities and destinations via transit. And then what is equitable transit-oriented development? This really represents Raleigh's vision to equitably share the benefits of transit and create transit-centered neighborhoods for residents of all income levels. It seeks to reverse displacement and ensure all of Raleigh is open to all of the city's current and future residents. And the guidebook outlines land use policies to expand housing affordability, promote job creation, programs to support small businesses in the BRT corridors, and plans to improve public realm and walkability around the stations. These opportunities will benefit neighborhoods by adding jobs and services within reach of the corridors, increasing incomes by expanding access to jobs, reducing transportation costs and commute times. Equitable development responds to the desires of existing communities and is intended to avoid the displacement of current residents. So in creating that guidebook, there was strong public participation in its development. Overwhelmingly, the community supported affordability around transit, denser housing types so that more people could live near transit, and greater building height to allow for bigger scale community benefits like affordability and carbon reduction. And the guidebook defined a handful of goals: enhanced affordability, preserving existing businesses, generating more jobs, guaranteeing pedestrian safety, growing around transit, and measuring those results. Inherent to this idea of equitable transit-oriented development is the need for initiatives across City of Raleigh departments to work together. These programs are greater than the sum of their parts. Raleigh's implementation of BRT can result in equitable transit-oriented development when we have all these elements working together. The good news is that all of these are already in the works, and I want to talk with you about a handful of. I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of these. I'm going to start with the New Bern Station area. The goal here, we're winding this down, right? We're just getting going with Western and Southern, but we're winding down New Bern. We started here because it was going to break ground first, and we set out to establish a community vision for growth, to identify land use changes, to make BRT accessible to as many people as possible, and to find opportunities for partnership. All that work is summed up in CP 722, which is going to be in front of you in January. A little sneak preview for you this afternoon. Like the guidebook, the station area plan identifies a suite of initiatives that work together to make equitable transit-oriented development a reality. Many of the same themes are endorsed. For example, expanding affordable housing, this time with an emphasis on options that focus on deeply affordable units, directing city funds to create more jobs and entrepreneurial activities, and putting pedestrians first. While you all haven't adopted this yet, lots of work is being done that advances the guidebook vision, that also advances things set out in the same plan because they're so closely related. When adopted, the station area plan includes citywide guidance for cultivating affordable housing in all of the corridors. And then a number of council budgeted initiatives are advancing policies from the guidebook as well as the station area plan. That includes conversations with St. Augustine's and other community stakeholders about Tarboro Street updates, as well as funding that was included in the fiscal year 23 budget for small business development staff that has been, I think Mark Walden told me somebody new started this week. So moving right along there. And then we have also, the city has purchased Zach's and expects to complete purchase of the DMV soon. Significant community input will be needed to prioritize programming for both of these sites, but they can be expected to include affordable housing. Just to help you understand capacity a little bit, the DMV site is more than 5 acres, and under current zoning could result in about 400 affordable units if that were the only use, right? One of the things that the New Bern Station Area Plan identifies as a need, I would say this is one of the places where we don't have strong programming yet, is this opportunity to increase assistance for existing low-income renters. So there's an opportunity to assess this, visit this, in creating the consolidated plan for fiscal year 25 through 29. Recognize that that would require reallocating existing resources or establishing new funding, but just this is one of the places where New Bern Station Area is supplementing, going a little bit further, one step further than the guidebook did. The guidebook also identified an array of zoning tools that could help advance equitable transit-oriented development. A number of these have already been added to the UDO, and in the case of the overlay, have already been applied to western and southern corridors. The overlay regulations, specifically the TOD overlay, has been updated twice, once around the time of the adoption of the guidebook, and again, most recently by you, to remove the prohibition on single-family development. We will continue to work, staff will continue to work with you to assess the effectiveness of the overlay. Likely we will see more revisions as time goes on, right? A reminder about what the overlay does right now. It limits future uses that might otherwise be considered in conflict with transit and other multimodal transportation. It requires future frontages frontage for new development so that new form supports transit. Provides an additional height bonus for projects that include affordable housing. That's at least 20% of those units earning 60% AMI for 30 years. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it's been amended to remove that prohibition on single family. So let's look at just a big kind of step back and think about how this is being applied in the New Bern corridor. So this is Z92, that's our city-initiated rezoning to apply the overlay. It would also make some changes to base districts, heights, and frontage, and as well as remove some older conditions. This is still in front of Planning Commission. You'll see it in January. Generally, what's included in the rezoning, though, are parcels that front along New Bern and Edenton, mixed-use zoning districts within a quarter-mile of corridor, future land use map designations for mixed use or medium scale residential or denser. Basically, are there places where we can implement the future land use map as part of this rezoning? And then a handful of parcels that would create contiguity in the overlay. The next couple of examples show how TOD changes the possible development outcome. I'm going to talk about Duplex Village, shown here just on the east side of Raleigh Boulevard, and I'll also talk about that Explorers school site on the south side of New Bern. So Duplex Village. This is really unlikely to yield more than about 170 units under the current zoning. We own about half the land and expect to develop some affordable housing here. Exactly how much to be determined based on that RFP process that we typically go through for partner projects. And then the owner of the western portion is also planning housing. That's private market housing. The proposed rezoning would not only increase entitlement, but it would also create an incentive for that party that owns the western parcel to include affordable units in their process. Without the bonus, and I really want to stress this here, so very little permanently affordable housing is built in Raleigh without a financial contribution from Raleigh. The private market is not doing it alone, right? And so the height bonus that's in the TOD is really the incentive that we have to spur the private market to include affordable units in their residential developments. All right, And then Explorus. This is on the south side of New Bern between Swain and Camden. I think most of you are familiar with this site. The rezoning here is not just an increase in entitlement, but the opportunity for 100 permanently affordable units to be provided by private development. And again, this is so important because so very little affordable housing is built in Raleigh without a financial contribution from Raleigh. I want to shift now and talk a little bit about the equity programs. This is, I talked about how all these pieces have to work together. Zoning is not a thing by itself. We have to have all these other things working right along with it. So equity programs, there are a number of equity programs in place. I want to highlight two here. Homeowner rehabilitation assistance is budgeted at $4.4 million for this fiscal year. About a quarter of that is designated for neighborhoods within a mile of BRT corridors. And then the home buyer assistance program is budgeted for $2.8 million for this fiscal year. Of that, $1.2 million has already been spent or is committed, and of that, about 40% are in neighborhoods within a mile of BRT. One of the big ideas that came out of the guidebook was the idea that we should have an equity fund, and the city has worked hard with your support, with your cooperation to stand that up. We call that the Public Project Community Support Fund. It was well funded in fiscal year 23 as well as 24. A number of grants have already been awarded. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those. So for business stabilization and capacity building, 2 grants here to Carolina Common Enterprise and El Centro Hispano. Carolina Common Enterprise is a legacy preservation program to retain existing enterprises and jobs. They help businesses plan for future sustainable growth with a focus on succession planning, coaching, networking, and technical assistance. And then El Centro Hispano strengthens workers' and entrepreneurs' capacities and provides tools to overcome structural barriers. They're working with more than 60 Latino businesses to provide information and resources around outreach, training, finances, and supplies. Another grant in this business stabilization and capacity building has gone to the Raleigh Chamber. They are providing support for small businesses impacted by BRT construction along New Bern Avenue via a resource guide, workshops, and marketing. We're also doing work through Public Project Community Support Fund around housing stabilization and community building, a grant to Southeast Raleigh Promise. They are completing door-to-door canvassing to identify qualified homeowners and residents and provide community workshops to connect folks with partner organizations offering services such as home assessments, financial education, estate planning, and foreclosure prevention. And then in the neighborhood stabilization and capacity building category, this is a grant out of the Neighborhood Initiative Fund. Eligible neighborhoods can receive up to $15,000 for an individual project. There's 6 in the pipeline, and the first one is complete. This was South Park East Raleigh Neighborhood Association organizing genealogy classes for residents. And then a couple of more recent updates coming out of the PPCSF. I mentioned Tarboro Street earlier. So this is a safe connection from Oakwood Avenue, from St. Augustine's to New Bern for pedestrians, for cyclists, for vehicles. There was an open house back in March, and this is currently in design. And then I did want to touch on Walnut Terrace. I know this is not in the New Bern Avenue corridor. I know. This is in the Dix Edge project area. The Public Project Community Support Fund also supports directs funds to projects around the Dix Edge project area as well. So this is a project to add sidewalks and bicycle infrastructure in the Walnut Terrace area, and that's currently in design. Another big push coming out of the guidebook was around financing and housing production, and we're making really great strides here. Lots of council authorized purchases and funding going on here. So here's a look at everything that's in the works in the New Bern corridor. This is a lot. It's really well distributed and really good coverage. We are working on similar efforts in the other corridors, but this corridor is the farthest along. right? We've been working here with the most focus the longest. So construction of more than 200 new city-owned affordable units is in various stages at 8 sites. And then additionally, the city is providing subsidy or gap financing to a mix of partners for more than 600 additional units on 4 other sites. I went really fast. This is so great. I just want to reflect on how long this list is for city-sponsored and city-financed. I want to wrap up by saying we are making great progress on equitable transit-oriented development. It takes sustained and concerted effort across departments, working on multiple programs and initiatives. These elements are all working together as a coordinated strategy to create a different outcome than what we have been seeing in the New Bern corridor over the past 10 years. Pairing a variety of resources with the TOD rezoning will direct resources to existing residents, owners or renters, and established businesses to help them stay in place and thrive. It also creates opportunity for more housing and businesses, and an increased supply of housing can be expected to slow the increase of cost of housing, making it less expensive for existing residents, while also opening the door for more people to live in the area. And in turn, this increases the number of people in Raleigh that can benefit from the existing and expanding infrastructure of the BRT. Thanks very much. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Bynum.
I want to say one more thing. You're going to see CP7 and Z92 in January. Implementation of the PPCSF governance structure is coming for fiscal year 25. And then Housing and Neighborhoods will be working to, you remember I talked about that assistance for existing low-income renters. They will be working on some information to bring for you to look at as part of the fiscal year 25 budget process.
Okay, Councilmember Melton.
I want to say thank you very much. You did a fantastic job explaining all of this. There is a lot, I think, of public concern naturally about change, but certainly when you go in and make a big investment like this about what's going to happen to the area. And I think you were spot on by saying how these changes are happening now, and the only way we can redirect them to be more equitable is to come in intentionally. So I have a few points. One, I can't cart you around with me everywhere I go to explain this to everybody, and you explain it way better than anybody else can. Do we have a plan to put this in one place on our website? Is it already there? Is there like an interactive tool or something where we could have this information, resources that are available that folks could access, but then also just for informational purposes? I think it'd be immensely helpful for me, and I'm sure all of us, when we get these questions about what are we doing to address these issues, if we could point folks in one direction to at least get a base of knowledge. So I think that'll be really important. I love the focus on increasing support for low-income renters. I think that's going to be key, and quite frankly, something we probably should have been implementing sooner, but I think having a focus on it now is great. And then the last thing I wanted to flag, I think probably all governments get this, but I hear it all the time, is that in Raleigh, quote, we study everything too long, we don't build anything quickly enough, then it's too expensive. I do think that the ZAC site and the DMV site and Duplex Village site, we really need to get shovels moving on that as soon as possible. I know we need robust community engagement, but I'm hoping that we at least have a base level of understanding of, in general terms, what we want to see there, fill that in with some community support, and then get some homes built for people as soon as possible. I don't want to see those sites empty for the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, Councilmember Harrison.
Yeah, just a couple questions, and thank you for the presentation, Bynum. It's really helpful to see all of this in one place. The 8 growth centers, what are those, or where can I find those? I couldn't really tell on the map easily.
So the growth framework map is in the comprehensive plan, early in the framework section of the plan. Don't look, you might get queasy. They show up on this is the growth framework map. This is a little washed out, I apologize. You can't see this online in the comprehensive plan. And then the growth framework map and our urban form map are not exactly the same, but you can see the urban form map in IMAPs, and sometimes it's more helpful to be able to zoom in and out and look at it that way, right? And they do correspond roughly to each other in terms of where growth should happen.
Okay, I'll check that out.
And you can see them roughly here. So there's a really big one over here around on the west side of Blue Ridge. There's a brand new one down here in the southeast corridor. It's a big one up around Midtown. There's one up around Crabtree Valley Mall. This one is up at Triangle Town Center. There's one out near Wake Med. There's also one kind of northwest of downtown. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And Briar Creek, is that another one?
And Briar Creek is yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I needed. And I do want to just second that opportunity to increase assistance for existing low-income renters. Do we have any kind of ideas on the table there yet, or is that conversation that needs to start?
I would hand over to Housing and Neighborhoods for more detail. My understanding is that's an idea that we've all recognized as something that is a place where we could expand the suite of programs. And that could be a big part of the discussion with development of the consolidated plan. And I don't know if Emila or somebody from Housing and Neighborhoods wants to add something more detail there. I don't know if you have a more particular question.
You did a really good job on it.
Yes, that was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all probably are aware. I mean, this is just probably the most vulnerable population in the corridor. So if we don't have a plan in place for that, I'd say very soon, that's where I start to get, I'll just say, queasy on big changes that we have proposed.
Yeah, I mean, I think you explained it well. So there are, existing federal resources that can be utilized for tenant-based rental assistance and also could be geographically prioritized. And so that's something we're gonna, we're going through the consolidated planning process in this next year to see what the public, wants, how the public wants us to utilize those funds. And I think we're gonna, think about different ways to create that type of support for 30% and below renters and bring that to you all outside of that.
Great. Looking forward to that. I'm also curious, is it possible to get any information on the impact of the TOD so far in the western or southern corridors? I recognize they've just recently been passed, so.
Sure, I can talk a little bit about that. So we've had inquiries from property owners in all 3 corridors about how they might utilize the bonus. We have not seen any site plans filed yet, but there definitely seems to be interest. That's something that we are watching very carefully, right? Because the bonus really has to hit the sweet spot, has to give enough to the property owner that it's worth their while, but it also has to give enough to the community that it's worth the city's while to offer it, right? So if it's not getting used, it's not quite right. And if it's getting used just like, I don't know exactly how we would quantify, but if it's getting used too much, we might say, oh, we're not asking for enough out of the bonus, right?
Yeah.
And I think at this point, it's a little too early to tell. So those overlays were applied, gosh, it's only been about maybe 14 or 15 months. And so I would not really expect, I would expect maybe in the next 6 months or so, we might start to see site plans that take advantage of the bonus.
Thank you.
Councilmember Patton, and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Hi, thanks. I have several questions. Where to start? I had some of them are already taken. That just put an exclamation point on increasing assistance for existing low-income renters. I was going to ask you about the calculations on that sweet spot of the like TOD bonus, and if you're able to share a little bit more weeds
Sure,
around how
I
you
can
got
talk a
there.
little bit about that. So that was developed really as part of the guidebook process. We worked with a market analyst to help us understand what was happening in development around town. And really what we were hearing from them is that where the development community would be likely to pick this up would be in the sort of 3 to 5 range, right? Or maybe 6, because it's going to be mostly stick built on podium where that's making enough of a a big enough difference in financing that it's worthwhile to add the extra height and get some more market units and some affordable units for that to be worthwhile for the developer. And so really kind of key in some of these, in all the BRT corridors, because that is, it's not going to work for steel. It's going to be in that kind of lower scale mid-rise development pattern. Does that help?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
great.
great.
That's helpful. And then this is an adjacent question. The FTOD?
The FTDO,
Yeah.
the frequent transit development option.
Yeah. There are too many
Yeah.
similar letters. That one has been in place a bit longer. Have we seen uptake with that?
Yes, we are seeing a lot of interest in that and also a lot of execution in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you happen to have any numbers?
I don't know those numbers off the top of my head, but I can maybe look back over my shoulder. Pat might know. He'll be Googling while you ask your next question.
That's fine. And then I just did some quick math on those two slides of the affordable housing. It looks like if these all come to fruition, it's roughly 1,000 units along the corridor, roughly 1,000 affordable units. So that's awesome. Just wanted to kind of like put a bow on that. I wanted to ask a little bit more about the predatory buyers education work that's mentioned there. I haven't, I might be wrong, but is it like off the ground? Are we?
I'm going to have to
doing the
defer
work?
to Housing and Neighborhoods on that one.
Sure.
For information about predatory. Here comes Lamont out of the back.
Good afternoon, Pat Young with Planning and Development. So on the frequent transit development option, which is part of the missing middle changes from 2021 and 2022, there's been 340 units approved, 250 of those, 340 units total submitted, 80 are under review, 260 are approved.
Do you know how many of them are affordable? Took advantage of that?
I don't have that handy. I can get that and provide that to you. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. The predatory lending is part of our suite of programs in PPCSF, and it is off the ground.
Okay. And where is it? Where does it fit in like the partners that were mentioned on these slides?
Southeast Raleigh Promise.
They're doing the Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. I think I'm set for now.
Definitely, thank you for the work and the presentation. It's still a lot of work to go and move forward. A couple questions. One, as far as the community programming for ZACs and for the DMV site, where are we as far as getting that started? I know we have ZACs under purchase.
Right.
That is pending DMV because the state is, I know, still in the building. So where are we as far as the community engagement piece?
Right, I think community engagement on DMV would probably wait till after close. And then I'm going to turn to my Housing and Neighborhoods friends again. It looks like Ms. Hinton is lurking behind me to talk to you about Zach's engagement.
I was most definitely lurking. Taisha Hinton with the Office of Community Engagement, and specific to the DMV site. So we've already started meeting with a group of what we're calling process leaders to gain an understanding of what they would like to see on the site. It's made up of a lot of natives to Raleigh, a lot of community advocates, business partners, etc. It's a very informal group, and listening to their recommendations so that we can develop more of a long-term plan as to what engagement will look like. I won't spoil their ideas just yet, but we have started those conversations, and we've started the kind of framework for engagement in the different phases of it.
Okay, thank you. As far as the public project community support fund, I see we've kind of have already allocated the 0.5, and there's about just under $1 million left. What's the plan for that?
That's a great question. Maybe for, I see Mr. Moore coming up to talk to you about that.
Get everyone up here by the end of the day.
Yeah. I'm just like the MC. All the talent. Come on.
Good afternoon. Michael Moore with the City Manager's Office, and thank you for the question. I think you see the remainder of that initial investment represented in the Tarboro Road work and then also in that work in the Walnut Terrace area. So if you total it all up, we've got that allocated to do some of that infrastructure work and some other sidewalk gaps kind of along the corridor.
Okay, so mainly just looking at infrastructure from sidewalks and connectivity.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just two more questions. For the 30-year affordability, that 20%, how do we, if someone were to use it, how do we track it to ensure it remains affordable for that time frame if they're not using a tax credit?
Right. I have some notes here. Let me get to the right page. I knew you were going to ask me about this.
The city manager just said the tenants will tell us.
Well, I'm sure. Yeah,
Yes.
that's the first point, but just on our side.
So my recollection of the way the code reads is that it has to be certified annually through the city, just like other units have to certify through Housing and Neighborhoods. There's some work to do on setting up that tracking program, but I think we would try really hard to make that mimic what's happening through our already established reporting system.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, kind of more of a statement, on the assistance for low-income renters. I know some of the landlords over there, they accept vouchers from the Raleigh Housing Authority. So I think maybe if we can also leverage and see what other programs they have to also track and assist low-income renters on top of what we're doing, I think can hopefully have a deeper impact.
Thank you.
Councilmember Black?
Hi, Bynum.
Hi.
So I was looking at some of the different general demographic maps, and I'm seeing the area along this area is about 50 to 100% non-white. The household incomes, they're all I'm seeing $29,000, $31,000, and then I'm seeing a really big increase in assessed property values. Is there anything that we have in place to help with property values and helping people who own homes? I know we talk a lot about rental assistance, but that was something that we hear a lot about, and I'm like, do we have any? Somebody asked me about it today, and I was like, I don't know if the city has anything in place for helping with that.
Right.
And it seems to be getting worse.
Mm-hmm. So county manages the assessments, leverages and collects the property tax. My understanding is that they do offer assistance, tax relief assistance to property owners. That's a county program. That's certainly something that we talk a lot about. I think there's some, as terms of what the city can do, I think there are some limits. We can't rebate or relieve, we can't reduce the, what am I trying to say? We can't reduce what's required up front.
Right.
But there is the possibility that we could return funds. Not return, but offer kind of a payback.
Like a difference sort of thing.
Yeah. So.
Have we looked into that?
But that right now that's coming mostly through that's already being offered by the county. And so I think that's a question for the city in terms of how would we want to budget that?
Yeah.
How would we set the qualifying
Yeah. I
standards?
think that would be something interesting to talk about because I know the county holds a lot of that, but it's still in our city. So how can we talk about that more? One of the other things that I don't know if I understood is when you were talking about the entitlements of, you had two examples. One was the Duplex Village and one was the Explorers Elementary School. Are these going to be zoned for houses? What's happening?
Sure. So many slides. Wow.
So while Bynum is trying to find that slide, to further answer your question, Councilmember Black, for homeowners, through some of the programs that are currently already provided, we have some exemptions for seniors, veterans, and those people in the community that are disabled. Those are current programs that already have some type of waiver or rebate in what the overall tax requirement and liability is on an annual basis.
It's also required that it be approved by the legislature. We don't have the authority to do that, and that's what the county did when they moved that forward.
Okay. Is there a way we can deepen that?
So what?
Is there a way we can deepen that work?
It has to go to the legislature.
Okay. Sounds like an interesting topic for our upcoming retreat, yeah, with our legislative agenda. So yes, back to the entitlements. So what's happening here?
Okay, so Duplex Village right now is this area on the south side of New Bern, east of Raleigh Boulevard. It's kind of a triangular shaped property. It's currently zoned R10, which allows apartments, townhouses, single family. It's about 10 acres, and under the current zoning, we're projecting they could get about 100. You could get about 170 residential units out of this. What the city-initiated rezoning, the Z9222 proposes here is to apply the TOD overlay, to apply the Green Plus frontage. I think you all remember there's been a lot of talk about trees in the New Bern Avenue corridor. So one of the zoning tools that came out of that project was to apply this Green Plus frontage that has a more specific, robust planting requirement on private property along the corridor to keep or replace tree coverage along the corridor. The shift from R10 to RX5, you don't really get a change in allowed unit type. What you do get is the possibility for some ground floor corner retail, so it has to be in a corner unit at the intersection of two public streets. There's a couple opportunities for that on the site existing, and then possibility for maybe one additional public street through here. So you can imagine there might be a couple of opportunities for retail on the ground floor here to serve. And then the maximum number of residential units with the proposed rezoning, just a by right development, goes up to almost, it's probably more like about 800 units. You know, our numbers always, the tool that we use always projects crazy high. So maybe more like 800 units. And then if you use the bonus, that would give you, another 3 stories conceivably. And so that means you could build even more residential. And of that, you could expect to see maybe as many as 170 affordable units coming out of the private market.
And that's what's going to happen at the elementary school too? Are they?
So the elementary school example, this is currently NX3, so that's your neighborhood mixed use. So you can have standalone retail in this. The NCOD is here on the whole thing, and then the green frontage on a portion. So the commercial square footage max here is about 200,000 square feet currently. And then with the, maybe if it were just residential units, maybe around 300 units. The proposed rezoning here, the base district is not changing, so that range of allowed uses is the same, but you have the opportunity for a taller building, more residential entitlement, just because there's more height there. And then if they utilize the bonus, the opportunity to deliver affordable units out of the private market with no city subsidy. Right?
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, I was just a little confused because, I went to Explorer, so I'm like, what are they doing? What's happening?
Yeah.
I was just a little confused, but I got it. I think those are my only 2 questions, so thank you.
Councilmember Harrison?
Just following up on these 2 examples, so it looks like the proposed zoning wouldn't have any requirement of affordable units. And I'm just curious, was there any conversation about having some requirement of affordable units? Because that would be, I assume, legal. We could require that with this particular type of TOD. Is that correct?
We can't require affordable units out of hand. The legislature doesn't let us do that. That's considered inclusionary zoning, and we can't do that.
Not with, so an overlay district.
Right, that's right. We can't, not even with an overlay. We can offer a bonus for the inclusion of affordability, which is what the overlay is doing here.
Okay, so I guess maybe what I'm thinking of is you keep the existing zoning and then you get a bonus to get to the NX5, for example. I'm just kind of working my way back so that we might have it more automatically. Because I think my ultimate concern is, do we have the right numbers here in terms of incentives to get us to the affordable piece? And I think that's where I really want to see what happens on the western and southern side so that we can dial this in.
Councilmember Jones?
Hi, thank you. And on that topic, I'm just wondering, you mentioned it earlier, as we are looking at the data, at what point do we put metrics in to say, okay, we're going to check back at a year or 2 years to see if we've met that? Are those in place?
I would say that, so it's been, what, like 14, 15 months since the overlay was applied in Western and Southern. And it's really too early, I think, for us to see site plans being filed. I would say if we don't see something, probably in the next 9 months, 6 to 9 months, maybe we would start to sniff around and wonder, start to do some research about maybe we need to revisit, might do some more work with the market analyst, might do some interviews with private market, those kind of things to try to assess why it's not getting picked up. But we are watching very carefully. Absolutely, just like you are. Right? Like, what's the point of having a bonus if it's not giving results?
Right, and that's
Yeah.
just the initial. So once you get in 6 to 9 months, but then is that the only check? Are you going to check back again? Like, let's say you have 20% of whatever date you do, that you have 20%. Is that enough? What is enough? And will you check back in 6 months, in a year from that, to say, okay, now we've upped it to 50% of our proposed, how does that look moving forward? Not just the initial check on how many affordable or how many taker uppers are there?
I would say this is like cooking bacon versus cooking soup. This is not cooking soup that you can just like sit on the stove and go off and fold some laundry and do some stuff. Cooking bacon, you got to stay with it, or you're gonna burn the house down, right? So, you got to keep watching. It's a full-time job.
No, I
right?
totally agree. I'm just wondering what those
I
metrics
think we
look
all
like.
see
So I'm
it
just
that
trying to
way
find out
as something
what
that
that looks like.
We have to keep watching it. We'll be watching to see when did the first projects come in. We'll be watching to see how many of them there are and what's happening over time. This is not a set it and forget it. This is not a crock pot, right? Like this takes tending. I'm using very light language, but it's very serious. We have to pay attention and keep tending this and keep assessing and evaluating to know
Right,
if
and I
it's
think
working.
for me, as I'm talking to the community who's looking for that, it's hard for me to not have those, like, oh, we're going to check back at this point, we're going to, or better language for me
You
to
want
say
to
that.
you would like a fixed public published
I would
schedule.
like
of-
something that I could reassure the community, that I can say, hey, no, we are, rather than, oh, no, we promise we will, and then what happens if we don't? I'm not saying that you wouldn't, but I'm just trying to reassure the community who is very vocal, about these questions and these concerns. So I'm just trying to make sure that we have a plan. I don't doubt that you do, but I'd just like to know it. That's all. There he is. There he is.
Yeah, hey there, Pat Young with Planning and Development. We certainly can work with you if you want to direct specific metrics or outcomes. We can consider that. We did not recommend that initially because we just, as Bynum just explained very articulately, wanted to carefully watch, track, and monitor and report back to you. I think, as you're well aware, property values are constantly in flux and they change from street to street, property to property. So it's very difficult to dial in or calibrate that bonus. It varies significantly, right? We'd almost have to work out some kind of algorithmic bonus that allows, that moves with the market. And there's been some academic research on this and things that we can continue to explore. But the risk of having a bonus that is not calibrated properly, that's not incenting the outcomes you want, is to have underbuilt sites, right? And you'll just get less housing overall. And as Bynum, I think, showed, the most inequitable outcome is to have less housing than the market is demanding, because that will accelerate prices faster than anything.
My second question relates to the engagement. I know we also mentioned here that we did a lot of engagement prior to. What does that mean? What did that look like? How many people? Like, what were the metrics for how much engagement we had leading up to this moment?
So over 5 years, I can't tell you off the top of my head how many meetings and how many surveys and how many touches, but golly, it's been a lot. Lots of meetings run out of the design process for all 3 BRT corridors. Lots of meetings run around the planning, surveys around each, open houses on each. Lots of, so much mail. We send so many postcards and so many letters, right? We post signs. We do a lot to get the word out, a lot of social media. I don't know that I can quantify that across 5 years, how much touch that is, but it's a lot.
And I don't doubt that for a
Coming out
second.
of-
I think that me coming, or us coming in new to this, and these questions get answered, it's kind of like a deer in the headlights, because I'm like, I don't know how. I'd love if there was, and not saying that you should do it now, but if there was a dashboard to be like, look at all the great things we've done, how we've engaged with the community, because coming in this late in the game, we'll say, because we're about to go through this, it's hard to amplify the work you've done to show that we have touched the community. So if there's any way to get that information so that I can share that, just as a way to communicate with the public, it's something that I think that I'm lacking at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to say to comment on that. I think I understand. We have done a lot, and but sometimes we hear we haven't done anything. So I think from what I'm hearing is how do we document and communicate the work that we've done? I've always said our biggest challenge is ourselves in communication, and getting the information, the word out. So I think whatever staff, council can do to help city manager, that resources you all may need, definitely continue to let us know and make us aware, because I know the work you've done. I've said in the meetings, the community has shown up, willingly or not. In some meetings they called themselves, in which I know we've shown and have attended going forward. So I just want to say, I know there's more conversation we're going to have on all of this. June 30th is going to be another deep dive. January 30th. I had it 30th right. January 30th is going to be another deep dive where we're specifically going to be talking about the New Bern Avenue corridor per se. But I think having data and information, to Councilman Harris' point, on some of the challenge, like even some of the pictures of the homes and changes we may have seen along the southern and the western corridor may also be helpful. As far as when we're looking at this holistically, because I think that's the theme. We have to look at this holistically as well as we drill down in sharing information.
Just real quick, if I might, Pat Young again, Planning and Development. We did have a slide in here that really did a deep dive on all the engagements in the New Bern corridor. We did cut it in the interest of respecting your time, but we've shared that previously in a weekly manager's report, so we will reshare that, and then we'll also make sure it's included in the January 30th presentation.
Councilmember Patton.
Hi, sorry, just a couple more from me. On the slide, the New Bern Station Area Plan recommendations, the one with all those little icons, it mentions sustaining New Bern Avenue as a center of Black culture and economic opportunity, with roughly $1 million allocated to that work. Can you share, I imagine it's like cross-cutting from some of the other programs you've shared. Can you share which ones, like what speaks to that specifically?
So this plan's not adopted yet. These are the recommendations of the plan, and part of the work that we've done is to put some order of magnitude costs around the recommendations of the plan for your consideration at adoption, for you to think about how you would want to reflect the recommendations of the plan in the budget, in future budgets.
Okay.
Right? So none of this is budgeted right now. This is just the work of the plan saying, these are the things that the community has identified as needed. These are the best practices that we've recognized that need to be addressed. Here's how much we think it would cost you to begin to address these.
Okay. So, and will that come forward with like some ideas of what implementation kind of means for?
Yes,
for
this
something
is like We're in the airplane looking down at the map and on the slide, right? So what we'll see at the public hearing will be more detailed, and there's a ton more detail in the project report.
Got it. Okay. I'll be sure to read it.
And if you want to take a look at that, yeah.
And then my last one, kind of building off of the like, what metrics do we have in place for our future reflection? Like you showed the really informative maps of the change of the corridor from 2000 to 2020, and we see it's becoming wider and wealthier. I'm curious if there's like a way we will forecast out to like 2040 and say like, this has been a success because we have prevented displacement, and what might that map look like? And maybe as a follow on, like, what cities are we using to point to who have done this successfully?
Kind of on the leading crest of the wave here. So I don't know that, I think of like the Cleveland Health Line as maybe an example. There are probably a couple others that we might look at in terms of what other folks have done to track and assess effectiveness and impact. I think your point about how will we know did equitable transit-oriented development work? Yes, again, I think gotta watch the bacon in the pan, right? Do we have a schedule yet? No, but we will get there. Yeah, heard.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for this presentation. I like the bacon in the pan. That was a good analogy, so thank you. And be looking forward to January 30th too, when we continue this discussion. So thank you.
Appreciate the time.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Guess that is it for now. I'm going to adjourn the meeting, and we will see you back here at 7 p.m.